There's a lot of stuff in this episode that's dealing with synchronicity, and it all started with the Hellier thing when we started talking about that. And after seeing that and getting involved in that, I found that a lot of the things I started coming across and reading and watching, just they just kind of came up. It wasn't like I was seeking them out, but they all seemed to kind of be dealing with similar ideas, not necessarily all dealing with goblins, but more so the fact that there's some sort of crossover between all of this stuff. So I was talking a bit in this episode about the synchronicity and also talking about all the other weird shit that ties in with it. So we recorded this episode a few weeks ago, and we've kind of just been sitting on it because of all the technical stuff that we were dealing with. So it's kind of just been sitting there, and we're finally getting around to putting it out now. But I just today was listening to a pretty well-known paranormal podcast, and it just so happened that they were kind of dealing with, or they were talking about the same sort of thing that I'm getting at here. And they even used some of they were talking about Lovecraft, which I'll mention. I believe I think I started this episode off with Lovecraft, and Aleister Crowley, and talking about aliens and how it kind of ties together. We talk about different things as well, but it was just weird to me that the day before we released this show, I turn on the latest episode of this other podcast to give that a listen, and it's dealing with the same subject matter that I'm talking about on this show. So I just wanted to share that with you guys because I thought it was a fun synchronicity, and it kind of ties in with what I was talking about with how these things just kind of kept presenting themselves to me since I've seen that. Anyway, that's a story for another time. I hope you enjoy this show, and if you haven't yet, go check out our Patreon page because it's pretty awesome, and we just put out Cryptomania. I've got a story to tell you, Mateo. I want you to tell me if any of this sounds familiar at any point, and then I want you to guess what story I'm telling you.
Ooh, I'm in.
Yeah, it's a magical mystery. All right, so there's a guy who writes an article about these weird creatures that are showing up in remote areas around mountains and deep forests and caves and waterways that flow out of the mountains. And he gets a letter back after this article is published. He gets a letter back from someone who lives in this remote area, and they're saying that there's these creatures that are coming out of the woods or the caves, and they are tormenting him at his house. They're bothering him and coming on his property, trying to get into his house. And mysteriously, there's also a cave in the area that has weird voices that come out of it, but the entrance to the cave appears to be blocked by a large rock that looks like it was placed there. Does any of this sound familiar to you?
Yes, sir. That is that Hellier documentary.
You are correct. However, that's not the story I was telling you. The story that I was telling you was a story called The Whisperer in the Darkness by H.P. Lovecraft.
Whoa.
Written in the 1920s.
No way.
So,
I know that story, and I didn't make that connection.
So we actually, when we did the Hellier episode, we had a listener email us about that. And it's really funny because since this whole Hellier thing has come up, it seems like a lot of these connections have been being made, just kind of like almost like synchronicity, just like what was happening to the people in the documentary in Hellier. But this was one of the synchronicities we faced, because I was actually planning on doing this very episode that we're doing tonight and talking about Lovecraft. Not only talking about Lovecraft, but talking about how it relates to Hellier and how it relates to the nature of the paranormal as we know it, and how, and not Lovecraft specifically, but I'll get to that. But back to this point, we had a listener who emailed us that listened to our show on Hellier and watched the documentary, and he got back to us and made the exact point that it's almost just like Whisper in the Darkness. Now, for those listeners who are not familiar with Lovecraft, I'll give you a quick rundown of the story. As I was saying, it was there was a journalist who lived in Massachusetts. He was also a professor of literature at Miskatonic University, which is a fictional college in Lovecraft's universe. But he starts hearing about this. Well, there was a flood that occurred in Vermont. So he was writing about all these reports that are coming out of Vermont after this flood of these weird creatures that were found floating in the water with the floods. And he thought that it was just part of local folklore, and people were seeing maybe bloated corpses of livestock that just looked weird because they had been in the water because of the floods. So he writes this whole article kind of downplaying what's going on. But then he gets this letter from a guy who lives in this remote area of Vermont who is telling him that he's a rational man, and he would, if it wasn't for his own experiences, he would take the side of the writer. And he starts to have this correspondence back and forth with this professor, and he's detailing all these things that are happening at his house. And there's these creatures that they're called the Migo. They kind of look like if a shrimp had legs and crab claws, but they also have wings, and instead of a head, it's like a mass of antenna, and their faces are bioluminescent, and they communicate through color on their face rather than speech. But they're able to mimic human speech in a buzzing manner. And he's just telling him all about these things and trying to provide evidence, and he's showing footprints that are around these caves. And then there's symbols carved into stone, and all this stuff is going on. And it's so much like Hellier, even down to the fact that there's that cave that voices are coming out of that have something covering it. Mm-hmm. And it's, I don't want to give away the ending or anything, but it's the first half of it is correspondence between these two, and then they arrange a meeting. So then the professor actually goes to this area of Vermont and goes to the guy's house so he can experience it firsthand. And then the second half of the story is detailing that. And it's weird how closely that they mirror each other. And I mean, it didn't end the same, obviously, because anybody who's read the story knows it would be kind of weird if a documentary ended in that fashion. It would be pretty obvious that it wasn't a documentary at that point. So this, and I've talked about this before in regards to Lovecraft, but when we talked about the Necronomicon and how Lovecraft may have been drawing on something, maybe even without knowing it, or maybe something was acting as a muse for him. But the situation with Hellier and that whole, the way that it started with this weird email chain that went back and forth, and then the guy disappeared, and it was to an old email address that was barely ever used, and he was pointed in that direction by some guy with a pseudonym. It makes me and I talked about this when we covered it, but it seems like there is an intelligence that's interacting with people, and it ties in with ancient aliens, the whole ancient alien theory. It ties in with all religion. It ties together hauntings and possession cases and UFO cases, and maybe even in some cases abduction scenarios or fairy sightings or any number of cryptids. But there's a lot of things that really, it's not just coincidence that they tie together. And it's not coincidence that people are throughout time have been saying that they've been, there's been things communicating with them that are not of our earth or not of our dimension or not of our reality, however you want to word it. But in the Bible, there's so many stories of people that are being given messages by angels or by God himself in some cases. And look at the way that that God is presented to people. I mean, we've got the burning bush. It was a bush that was on fire, and it was talking to Moses. And then when Moses goes up on the mountain and sees God, it's like this crazy light. And when they were in the desert, God appeared as a pillar of smoke in the day, a pillar of fire at night. And then the descriptions of the angels, it's all really crazy shit, but people are getting these messages. And you could look at even Buddha, if you want to take that for example. He attained enlightenment, but he went on like this crazy, almost cosmic journey in the same way that Jesus did. And their stories are really similar in a lot of ways, but they're giving this knowledge that's being passed down from a higher source. And you look back in scriptures, you look through even in any religion where prophets are involved, where they're talking to a higher being, or in the past with like the muse or the oracle, they were getting these messages from a higher power. They would go into like an ecstatic trance and get this information. And I think that psychics are or mediums, people that are legit, you know, not like Madame Cleo or John Edwards or that type of bullshit. But rest in peace, Cleo. Did you know she died?
No.
Yeah, she died. She died of, I don't even remember, but she died. She's dead.
Oh,
rest
wow.
in peace, Miss Cleo. But damn, Miss Cleo threw me off.
Your heart broke, Mike?
I am. Pouring one out for Miss Cleo right now. I think that people that have the ability to see things or to talk with spirits or get this information, I think that they're getting this information from another source. I don't think that it's necessarily an ability. I think somehow they are connected to this other source that's providing the information. Like with mediums, you can go to a medium and like a legit medium will be able to do things to a stranger and say very specific things that only the deceased would know or would say or word things in a certain way. And I don't think that that's necessarily the spirit of the person they're talking to. I don't think it works like that. But I think they're able to tap into this information, and it's something is providing them with this information, like a divine hand, but not God as in like the God of the Bible, but like when I say divine hand, something that's on a different level than we are.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the whole contactee movement, which we've talked about with the people that would channel alien messages. And there's also in history, especially among like the occult circles, but there's people that would communicate with angels, like John Dee, the famous wizard of Queen Elizabeth's court. He was known to, well, I shouldn't say known, but he was said to be able to commune with angels and have them give him information. And then there's also people that conversely say they speak with demons, and the demons are able to give them information. And there's lots of different grimoires and magic books that teach the ways that you can commune with these otherworldly beings. But then you look at someone like Aleister Crowley, for instance. He was really deep into the occult, but he had this book that came out called, I think it was the Book of Law. And he said that the entirety of the book was communicated to him over a few days that he spent in Egypt by an otherworldly intelligence he called Aiwass. And his description of Aiwass, he would typically see him in his periphery, but he was basically a man in black. He said that he had pale skin and wore dark clothes, and he had black hair, and he just but he would always stay in the periphery. He wasn't ever visible if he was to look directly at him. But then I don't remember what the other book was, but Crowley was in communication with another being called Lam, Lam, and this being looked, he drew a picture of him, and it looked like a gray, except instead of having solid black eyes, he had regular eyes, but everything else about him looked like a gray. So he's getting this information, and a lot of the information that was given to him was in a code or a cipher. And in the Book of Law, he started to explain how to decipher this code. And it's all based on breaking up words into their number value and then equating the number to other letters and making other words out of it. So it's this whole process. I don't really understand how to do it. I read a bit about it. They actually talk about it in the Hellier documentary. There's a whole book that's written about it called The Secret Cipher of the UFO Nuts. And it's referenced in Hellier a couple of times, but it's primarily about this secret code that was passed down. But the code itself goes back to, it goes even further back into like the Middle Ages, when the Knights Templar would use similar codes like that. And it was also adopted by the Freemasons. So you can see how the conspiracy theories are starting to tie in here. But it always seems like the Templars and the Masons are behind everything. But they're like, their traditions really have a hand in the occult side of things. So that makes sense. And getting back to Lovecraft, that's where you could see, if you've read Lovecraft through like his earlier stuff into his later stuff, there was a change in the way that things were written. So there was always the Necronomicon, and things seemed more like magical, but then it took on a cosmic approach. So it was almost like sci-fi, but dealing with these weird alien beings, but alien not in the sense that they're from another planet, but alien in that they're from some place in space, in another dimension, even not a physical place in space that we can access. And it's a lot like what this intelligence is that we're dealing with here. And we've said a lot of times on the show that UFOs and aliens are, they're like this one category, but then there's this other shit that's going on as well. And I think that, it's no secret, in my opinion, on the aliens thing. They're interdimensional. Everybody knows it. They're not nuts and bolts. Come on. Not flesh and blood. So I think that maybe that a lot of the things cryptids and whatnot, like goblins. If you remember in Hellier, they talk about the Hopkinsville goblins, which don't have, or which have big ears. But then they were talking about these other things that were showing up that they also called goblins, but they looked more like grays. But then there was another place where they had the ears again. So maybe it's just like the way that they're manifesting themselves in this plane of existence. And maybe the ears or the way that their heads are shaped denote rank or a certain status among whatever they are. Because if you look at other sightings, it's not just in Kentucky where this sort of thing happens. And you could even look at the Dover Demon and look how that was described. That could be one of these things.
You know, now that you mention it, I was just watching the Fresno Nightcrawler video footage and the Yosemite Nightcrawler footage today, a few hours ago. And I was like, you know what? You can throw those in there too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that these things also get lumped in with nature spirits, because nature spirits, a lot of times you'll hear about elves and fairies, but you'll also hear about elementals and things of that nature. And I think it's just different ways that this intelligence is able to manifest. And there's this idea that there's two different types of intelligence, and that they're kind of in opposition to one another. And even among, all right, so from a human perspective, there's good and evil. But if you go like to a higher, well, I don't even want to say higher, but if a different dimensional frequency or a different reality, where things are the way that nature is more neutral. So if these beings are a natural part of the world, then I think their motivations are more neutral. I don't think that it's that good and evil. I think they're above those types of concepts. I think those are really just things that are human concepts. But these two groups of intelligences are in opposition to one another. And there was, in the Theosophical movement with Madame Blavatsky and even with Crowley afterwards, there was this thing called the Great White Brotherhood, which was not a Nazi movement at all. This was the name that they would give the intelligence that would communicate with them and give them information about like what people would need in order to get to attain peace and harmony, and a lot of the stuff the channelers were getting as well. They referred to that as the Great White Brotherhood. But there was also the Black Lodge, which was supposed to be the darker side, obviously, because it's the Black Lodge.
Cooler name.
And yeah. But they were in opposition to the White Brotherhood, and it was kind of the intelligences kind of use people as pawns. And there's a theory. Typically, this is a theory that's in UFO circles, where there's two groups of aliens that are manipulating humans and fighting the wars on behalf of these aliens. And so typically it's like the Greys versus the Nordics, or the Greys and the Reptilians versus the Nordics. But if we look at it from this perspective, where we've got the White Lodge and the Black Lodge in opposition to one another, and there's these non-physical intelligences that are manifesting in our reality in various forms, I think that this would explain a lot of the weird shit that goes on during wars, like the Foo Fighters and the weird cryptid sightings and the UFOs and all of the weird shit that goes on that usually in wartime is thought to be part of the enemy. And then once the war is over, we realize both sides were seeing the same thing. So I don't think it would be out of the realm of possibility to assume, if there is an intelligence that is manipulating people that they are driving us to war. And when you see things like Germany during World War II, for instance, where they were able to amass so much power and they were a juggernaut. Nobody could stop them for the longest time. And meanwhile, they're taking all these captives and putting people in concentration camps and doing all manner of horrific things. And then all of a sudden, everything stopped for them. And they reached too far and something fought them back when nobody thought they could be stopped. You know, they defeated France. They were destroying Britain. And it took them overstepping their bounds and going into Russia to really finish, to start their decline. But what if it was an intelligence manipulation? Because it really didn't make sense. There was no reason for Hitler to do that. But it seems like something may have manipulated him to make that decision. Because they had a non-aggression pact with Russia. All they had to do was leave Russia alone. But I don't know. But Hitler and the Nazis are always lumped in with the occult, and there's also always conspiracy theories about them dealing with aliens and having alien technology as well. And if any of that is true, well, we know a lot of the occult stuff is true because you can see that in the symbology that they utilized, and a lot of the things they would say and titles they would use and things like that.
Right.
But the whole alien connection is a lot more dubious. But if it's some intelligence that's guiding these people and able to manipulate them and give them some, because look at our space program. We wouldn't have a space program if it wasn't for the Nazis. And I'm not saying that fucking aliens are telling us how to get to the moon, but the intelligence could act as a muse. But there's another side of this, the White Brotherhood and Black Lodge thing, that kind of paints a different picture about what's going on. So the idea with this, it's almost a theory in opposition to what I just laid out. But the White Brotherhood are actually the ones that do not have our best interest in mind. And if you look at, so I'm gonna get really woo woo for a minute here, because this is gonna get a little bit silly. Well, I don't want to say it's, just bear with me.
Excellent.
So the being that is us, not the body that we're in, but the if you want to call it the soul, the spirit, the astral body, whatever you want to call it, that thing that makes us, our consciousness, is in a physical vessel so that we can manifest on the physical plane. But you can't ascend when you're tied to the material. So the material world, the physical world, our physical reality. And what the White Brotherhood is trying to do is keep man complacent and trick them into remaining on the material world and existing in the physical plane, rather than ascending into the being that we're all supposed to become. And I think this is where you get the cycles of reincarnation idea as well for all the religions that believe in reincarnation. Your body dies, but your being is tied to the material world. So once your body dies, you get a new body because your spirit is tied here. So, and it continues that way until you find a way to ascend and break free of your physical body and ascend into the being that you are meant to be. But they don't want that. They want to keep us here, and they put on the disguise of an angel or a divine being, and they'll make us do things like follow religions or start religions or believe certain things because they know what we perceive as good. So if you are a Christian and an angel comes to you, or if Mary comes to you, you're going to believe it as like a proof that your faith is correct. And the intelligence knows this. And they'll do things that'll make you think that you're on the right path. So if I live a good life and I do this and that and the other thing, then I'll go to heaven. And that's like the carrot that they're dangling in front of you. Do what we tell you and you'll be redeemed in the end, knowing full well that your body is tied here and you're not learning anything. You're just continuing to exist in the manner that they want you to exist. So it's tricking the people into staying material. Meanwhile, the Black Lodge, when they show up, they appear like fucking monsters because they're not physical beings. So being tied to this world, being tied to a physical reality when you're a non-physical being is like torture. So they appear to be these huge, angry monsters that are terrifying to look at. And what they're trying to do is destroy the material world. So if you just look at it in that regard and view them as destroyers, then they're going to come off as the bad guys. But what they're trying to do is destroy the material world so that we can be the beings that we are meant to be.
Interesting.
Yeah.
In that line of thinking, there is no good or evil.
Yeah, there is no good or evil. It's just, I guess it's personal preference. Like if you have no desire to ascend into a greater being than you currently are, then, the White Brotherhood is where it's at. You don't want your world destroyed. But if you want to ascend into the being that you have the potential to become, then it's necessary that the material world gets destroyed, or at least you figure out a way to break the bonds from the material world.
It's like a non-technologically integrated matrix.
Kind of, yeah. But and somewhere in all of this, the back and forth between the two sides, there's these other agents that kind of seem like they're there to kind of create disinfo, or not really disinfo, because they're, I guess, cosmic disinfo. And so you've got the people, or I shouldn't say people, but the things like the Men in Black that'll show up and somehow know when you saw something you shouldn't have seen. And so they're there to kind of scare you into submission. And maybe they're agents for the White Brotherhood, and they're just kind of acting in opposition to what the White Brotherhood is doing with their UFO light shows and things like that. So they send these guys down to kind of muddy the waters, just like our government does with the UFO thing. It's all about the disinformation. You throw the truth out there, you throw the bullshit out there, and you just have both extremes on the spectrum, and nobody knows what's what. Put a guy, just some random soldier out there, have him tell the absolute 100% truth, and most people are not even going to believe what he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way it is.
Yeah, when it comes to being something in a world that maybe it doesn't belong, but it's certainly not natural. I mean, the worst thing that could happen is being the only thing that doesn't really belong. So, I mean, it would explain why there's tons of different things. Maybe that's like the disinfoing you're talking about, is having multiple weird things going on.
Yeah, right. Because it's like a attack to overwhelm. So you look at Bigfoot and you wouldn't think that Bigfoot would be the same type deal. But we remember when we talked about the Bigfoot that attacked the cabin and was throwing rocks at it and knocking on windows and stuff. That's very similar to what the goblins were doing. But notice how they never enter the house. Like a Bigfoot could punch through a window. A Bigfoot should be able to knock down a door, but they don't. They just fuck with the people in the house. pounding on the walls, throwing rocks on the roof.
But why these particular people?
I think in a lot of cases they're either living too close to somewhere where, like, so in getting back to the Lovecraft thing again, in Whisper in the Darkness, these things just wanted to be left alone and ignored. If people got too close to their territory, then they would try to scare them off. If someone came upon them doing whatever it was they were doing, then they would take the people away and the people would never be seen again. So I think that's kind of they're doing their own thing, and they need to take on a physical body in order to do that. What they're doing, who the fuck knows? It's not for us to know. It's, they exist on a whole other level, but they're doing something and they don't want to be bothered. And I think that's a lot of the missing 411 stuff relates to that. I personally haven't done any research on this, but I would think that if you would look in parks that had mountains or cave systems, that you'd find an increase in people that were missing in those areas. I know that the missing 411 stuff, a lot of it centers in the national park system, but I would be willing to bet that the places where it's higher are also connected to mountains or caves.
That's interesting. I definitely want to look into that just to see.
Yeah, I do as well, just to really, really compare what's going on. But it would be really interesting if that was the case, and it would kind of back this idea up that there's something that's lurking there, and maybe it is something that was there before us, and has been there and has been kind of guiding us. And then there's something that's trying to go in the other way. But maybe there's people that are working with them. And that's where you get things like the Dulce base, where there's the joint labs between humans and aliens. But they're all underground. And remember when Phil Schneider was talking about his encounter, they were drilling a tunnel down, and they came into this cavern where these things already were. So either the people that commissioned him knew what was down there and wanted them to go down there to discover this, or the things down there knew that they were coming and were waiting. But either way, they were there when they were digging down into this tunnel. Like, that's, of all the areas you could be digging, and you find that you dig into this cavern where these fucking 9-foot tall gray aliens that can shoot fucking laser beams out of their chest.
That is definitely weird. That is.
But again, and it's something underground. And a lot of this, and where do the reptiles live? Where do the reptilians live? Underground. Where do the Darrow live? Underground.
Yeah, the ant people. Underground.
The ant people, yep. And speaking of the Darrow, that ties in with Shaver's, with the Shaver mystery as well, because he was getting these communications that he was writing down about all this stuff, and he was able to have the rock books. Remember, he did the mail-in rock book library.
Mm-hmm.
But all of this information was being communicated to him, and he was, a lot of the things that he put in the book, or the rock books, I should say, actually worked on that cipher that was created and revealed in the Book of Law.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, so all this shit ties together. And I mean, when you look at who Richard Shaver was, you could say, oh, he was probably just he was aware of Aleister Crowley and he knew what was going on. The dude was a welder. He was a blue collar worker, which is not to say that blue collar workers can't be into the occult, but it didn't seem like that was where his interest was. He wasn't a Crowley follower. He was just a guy who was a welder, and he started hearing these voices. And they were communicating to him and telling him about the history of these races that lived on Earth before people, and he got all this information, and a lot of it tied in with this fucking cipher. It's crazy. So it seems like this, whatever this intelligence is, wants to communicate, but they want to keep it a secret. So you could get these weird messages, and a lot of the messages are in the names that they provide the people that they're communicating with. And the names get put through the cipher, and then it reveals the intention of the message.
Really? Like their first name, their literal first name?
Yeah, so not the people that they're dealing with, but the entities themselves.
Well, that's bizarre too. That's an interesting twist. All from the cipher?
Yeah.
Huh.
Okay, so there's Valiant Thor, and that equals Ra disk. So the sun disk of the god Ra, the Egyptian god Ra. And there was one named Master Aetherius, which, if you put through the cipher, is Elixir of Life and God. But you know what else matches with Elixir of Life and God? Indrid fucking Cold.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then there was an intelligence called Orthon, and that can equate to Jesus. And there was one named Aura Reigns that goes to female, but it can also mean let her.
Huh.
But so there's all these different names, and even the names that some contactees will end up taking work on the cipher as well. And certain places, planets that get mentioned in a lot of these channelings, they seem like nonsense words, but they all have relevance when put through this cipher.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty weird when you really get down to it. It's just because you see all these connections from weird places. Like there's the magic connection in the occult with Aleister Crowley and Madame Blavatsky, but then it goes back to the Knights Templar, and it's associated with the Freemasons, but it's also being given in communication between channelers and alleged aliens. So that doesn't make sense. And then Indrid Cold ties in with that, and the Hopkinsville Goblins case goes with all of that communication with the people that did Hellier. And then remember when they did the spirit box in Hellier, and how it was communicating through there. It just seems like it can't communicate directly. It doesn't seem. So it sends messengers with coded information, or it can communicate if we're in certain states of mind. Like if we go into, say, like a meditative trance, or through use of psychedelics, like maybe high doses of LSD or mushrooms or DMT. It's interesting with DMT as well, because a lot of people end up reporting experiencing similar things.
Yeah, they're always talking about seeing entities.
Yeah. And a lot of people report seeing like clockwork beings, and feeling like love emanating from these geometric shapes and colors. It's really weird how you would think people that if they're taking a mind altering substance that's going to make them trip, you wouldn't think that the trip would you'd think it would be unique to the individual, and you wouldn't be getting all of these reports of similar things occurring while in this state of mind. And even with ayahuasca, when people take ayahuasca, a lot of people will report seeing or experiencing similar things like giant snakes or jaguars. Or some people report seeing these little people that'll kind of watch them or try to communicate with them. And it's kind of weird. And as you know, I've talked about on the show, I've dabbled with psychedelics, and I've had many experiences, but nobody has had the same experiences. So it's kind of weird that certain things that are able to elevate you to a level, like I think it's the DMT, because DMT is also in ayahuasca. So I think it's DMT is the thing that can really elevate your mind to communicate and visualize these beings as they really are, rather than as they appear when they manifest in our reality.
See, that sucks, man, because I don't, I've never done any psychedelics. I wouldn't recommend somebody like myself doing psychedelics. I've been told that shit's not going to be for me.
Yeah, with the way that your anxiety is, I definitely would not recommend it.
Yeah, and it sucks because like everybody I know has, every friend I've ever had has. It's just like a passage of right. Everybody takes a fucking shot of acid in their life, and I won't. And it just I don't know. It makes me wish I could, because with the questions I have with studying this type of stuff, you presenting this information, it seems like we can get in maybe not get in contact, but at least in the presence of these things, and maybe establish contact at some point. I wonder what would happen if you sent somebody who's really in tune, done a lot of studying, maybe a spiritualist, maybe a psychic, into a jungle and give them DMT.
Yeah. Well, that's in a lot of cultures, uses of psychedelic drugs was a means to communicate with their gods. So with a higher intelligence, and everything from DMT to mushrooms to certain cactus flowers, it's been in use for long periods of time. It's like this is going back centuries, millennia even. It's an old thing, and it's when you look at, like, all right, so just think of ayahuasca itself and how crazy it is that anybody ever found out how to do it. Because the one plant contains the DMT, but if we ingest the DMT, we have enzymes that'll break the molecule down and render it ineffective. So we had to get another plant which inhibits those enzymes so that the DMT can take effect as we eat it. Or ingest it, rather. So the idea or the belief that has been passed down is that the gods gave this information to the people, and it's been passed down ever since. And they know they have to combine these two plants in order to make the ayahuasca, and that allows them to communicate with beings on a higher level. So maybe it was passed down from the quote unquote gods to them. But even when you think of things like peyote or the San Pedro cactus, eating the buttons of those, we all know that cactuses are sharp, and it's not something that you want to get involved with. And why would you think to eat something like that just out of chance? And then when you do eat it, you have this crazy intense trip that can last like a day. And then it seems like something would have drawn them to that and given them that knowledge that this is this is what you need to do. And I think some native tribes believed that was how they would enter the spirit world, is by taking these things, and that allowed their consciousness to exist on a higher plane, and they were able to communicate with these other things on the other side. So they just called it the spirit world, because what else are you going to call non-physical intelligence?
Yeah,
you can't say I went to the Bob world. It's based on pretty much anyone's belief system. If they were to experience non-physical entities, they would assume it was a spirit of some sort.
Especially if they weren't hostile in any way.
Yeah, right. And they're talking to you and sharing knowledge and things like that. But there's I mean, there's ways to get there without drugs, and we've had Kev on before and he talked about it, and I've had some conversations with him off the show, and he shared some exercises with me and some drum tracks. There's have you ever tried any of those the shamanic drumming tracks?
Yes, I did with the trouble I have with sleeping and nightmares and stuff.
Yeah.
One of the times we had Kev on, I talked to him about that. And then outside of the show, I talked to him about how bad my nightmares are. And he was like, I got the perfect one for you. Listen to this. And that I was shocked at how much that helped. I mean, with specifically what I wanted to do to be able to not control. I mean, that was one of the side effects as I was able to control these dreams, but just what I wanted to be able to do during these dreams to get them to stop or move on to something else. It helped in every aspect that I personally wanted help with when it came to dealing with it.
Yeah, it's a good way to get into the meditative state. And once you get a lot of practice getting into that state, you're able to kind of get, I mean, I can only speak from my own experience. But you do kind of get like these messages that'll come through, and they don't come through like a voice in your head. Although, I mean, maybe for some people it does. I've never had that experience, but you see images, and a lot of people would say it's just your mind has to visualize something. So this is what you're getting, but it's different than just a thought popping into your head.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I call it getting an impression. It's just something that appears in your head.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. And sometimes if you're focusing on that, it can lead you places, not physical places, but it can lead you to different things, whether it be inner things about yourself, or maybe even some knowledge or some feeling towards like, for instance, if you're dealing with a tough decision and you're not sure what to do, and you meditate on it, and you start getting these visions in your head, and you focus on the visions, and they kind of clarify the right path, for lack of a better term. But it's all in what you put into it. I think some people just use meditation to clear their head, and that's fine. It's a great exercise to just relax and kind of reset your mind a bit. But you can do a lot with it if you really work at it. And I think you have to put your intent out there as well. But somehow this intelligence is able to kind of tap into that intent. And I think in a lot of ways it's able to, these entities or whatever they are, they're able to tap into the inner part of us. And I think that's why in a lot of cases with hauntings, it starts small and gets stronger because it knows how to elicit negative reactions from us. And for some reason, it's able to, if not feed off it, use it for some purpose. And that's why when one of these things gets really, I don't want to say powerful, because that's as if to say that it started out like a little baby and then grew into this big monster. But it kind of, these things can kind of take a hold. And you hear that in a lot of haunting cases that get really out of hand, that it gets to the point where they can't push it out, and it's there, and they need help getting it out. And sometimes it's successful, other times it's not. But I think that it's the non-physical side of whatever these things are. Maybe it's not near mind, so that there's no need to create these bodies to manifest in our world, and they're able to just come through non-physically and interact with us. But a lot of times in hauntings as well, you'll hear people where they'll communicate with the spirit. Maybe they'll call a medium in. Some cases the kids communicate with the spirit, and they relay the messages that the Spirit's giving them. And I think that the kids thing has more to do with their innocence. And I don't mean it in like a corruption of the innocence sort of way. I mean it in like they haven't been jaded yet.
Inexperience with life.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so it's more palatable for them if some non-physical intelligence is talking to them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like a imaginary friend or something.
Right. Yeah, I just got to make a connection with what you're saying and getting that impression feeling. I mean, we both talked about getting that what we call our ghost detector. When
The big, I refer to it as the fear.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When that goes on, and I'm not saying I can talk to spirits because I can't. As I've talked about on the show, I've dealt with a lot of that shit, a lot of heavy shit, more than seeing shit, more than bumps and stuff moving by itself. But if I get that feeling, I'm able to, I don't know how to say it, and I don't want to sound stupid or too goofy, but I'm able to absolutely clear my mind so that I can receive an impression like that. And I'm able to tell when it's completely foreign to my brain. And if I focus on, if in my mind, if I've cleared everything and I don't get an impression, and if I focus on, maybe for lack of a better term, focus on reaching out for an impression, it feels dangerous. It feels like I shouldn't make that type of connection. So it sounds like a lot about what you're talking about. People, maybe that's how possession happens.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case. That somehow, I don't think that it's necessarily a demon. And an odd thing is, in a lot of cases, the possessed seem to be people that are already faithful. So I'm thinking that somehow through their faith, they're able to make a connection with something. And maybe because they are so pure, it's calling out. So if going back to the Black Brotherhood being the good guys that are trying to liberate us from our physical burden and help us to ascend to what we're supposed to rightfully be. Maybe one of these things attaches to her, and then when it gets brought into the physical plane by attaching to her, it goes batshit crazy, and all it can experience is rage at that point. So it just lashes out, and then it manifests as a possession in the person, and it's able to use the intelligence it has gained as a non-physical being in conjunction with the memories and things of the body that it's possessing.
So maybe these possessions are almost like failed manifestations.
Or I wouldn't say a failed manifestation, maybe more a failed bond.
Exactly.
Where one of these beings tries to bond with someone, and then something either they don't take to the physical world like they thought they would, or it's a mistake that it happened, and it just results in confusion and anger, which manifests as this wrathful demon-like being inside a human body.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting you bringing up the religion stuff too, because I mean, that's just a fucking shoo-in if you're trying to communicate with people. If you want to appear to somebody and not scare the shit out of them, you go to somebody who's super religious and appear as an angel, or say you're the voice of God. It's that simple.
Right. And I think that's where religion was formed, was this intelligence was reaching out, and we're just, we don't have a way to explain it. So it's got to be something more powerful than we are, because it's not here, but it's communicating with us, and it's doing things that we can't even conceive of, but it's doing it nonetheless. And then it starts as a story, or an experience, like a abduction report or something. That's how it starts, and then it goes from there. But because there was no frame of reference, it became a religion. There's things were a lot more isolated. It was harder for ideas to spread across the world at that point in time. So every culture had their own series of gods, their own belief systems, their own stories and mythologies. And I think it was really all just these same intelligences communicating with the people. And I mean, it happened all over the world. Religion isn't isolated to, or it wasn't originated in the Middle East. It's every single culture in the world has had religion. And you can't blame that on people from Babylon showing up in South America and teaching religion to the natives. But yet they have their own idea of religion, but a lot of the same type of ideas. You know, maybe their way to worship these beings is different, but apparently sacrifice was a real thing to these beings at some point, because you look in the Old Testament, all sacrifices all over the place. God demanded sacrifice.
I mean, yeah, well, not even just the Christian or Hebrew God. I mean, all gods, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. And we all know about the Aztecs and their sacrifices. That's like the thing that's most well known about them is that they would sacrifice people.
Uh-huh.
And that there's stories in Greek mythology of sacrifice. And not only people, but animals as well. So it's kind of weird that they were bloodthirsty at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And now that they've kind of backed off from that, or maybe that's where the missing people come into play now, because we're not so willing to sacrifice people to the gods. So they got to trick us into the parks. And get us that way.
You just solved that. I buy it, dude.
Who knows, man? It's just there's a reason why so much of this stuff is connected, and it's not just happenstance, and it's not just mimics. There's a real reason behind it, and I think if you're studying the paranormal long enough, and you really start looking, sometimes you find these connections in weird places, and you don't even realize it. But if I mean, somehow you can connect Aleister Crowley to the fucking Mothman.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense, but it's possible.
Yeah, it's there. The connection's there.
Yeah.
So when we talk about all this weird stuff, and it's weird, it gets out there. Like you said, you can link Aleister Crowley to fucking Injured Cold, but when we talk about this stuff and these connections and all these similarities, it seems to focus more around these weirder cryptids when we're talking about that. When we're talking about the Hopkinsville Goblin, and in the Hellier documentary, it definitely seems like they're talking about two different but similar entities. And like you said, Dover Demon, the Nightcrawlers, these things are weird and they don't make sense. So they kind of fit in place with what you're talking about. It kind of just, those things connect more specifically than others. And you said earlier, you don't know what they're doing, but it fucking really seems like they're there. It really seems like they're there. I don't know what show I was watching earlier, but they had these people really try to break down the Nightcrawler video footage, and they fucking couldn't debunk it. They really couldn't. And they did some filtering on it, and it's just astonishing footage. These things are there. What the fuck are they doing?
That's the thing. I don't think it's for us to know. I think we're meant to get little glimpses, little hints here and there, but I don't think it's for us to know because we are physical beings. So in order to understand these things, we need to be on their level, and a lot of us aren't. We exist solely in the physical world and not in the spiritual or I don't want to say the spiritual world because that's not really genuine to what we're talking about. But I also don't want to say the non-physical world because that's really ambiguous. But we don't exist on their level, for lack of a better term. We're just two completely different levels. And I know a lot of people when they're trying to describe humans trying to understand aliens, and they were often compared to ants, and we don't explain ourselves to ants. But in this regard, we're closer to ants because we're all, we're on the same level. We're in the same physical universe. So we have more in common with ants than we would these beings that exist completely non-physically, and they're able to just create these avatars to exist in our world.
And you know what's weird about that? It's that you're talking about being on their level, and it just doesn't seem like we can get on their level. You mentioning the cactus, I mean, even the very place you can find ways to communicate them in nature has natural protection to it. It doesn't even seem like we can achieve enlightenment on what these things are, even in death. Even if there is an afterlife, I don't think they run that.
Well, even when we try to hack the system, like with things like ayahuasca or peyote, even then, I don't think we can really comprehend what's going on. Like we can see certain things, like we can see the beautiful colored hexagons that shower us with love, but we can't really understand it. We just see it in our own frame of reference. So we're not even at that point. We're still, because we are still physical beings, we're not seeing things on their level. We're able to see things a little better, but it's still not really what it is. And I don't think there's any way of knowing that until you are able to shed your physical body. And with that, I would just like to say, please join me in siding with evil time traveling Barack Obama, and you can easily shed your mortal coil and be one with the non-physical universe.
He ain't lying, folks. He'll shed you of that meaty shell instantly.
You come grovel before evil time traveling Barack Obama. He will gladly cut your head off and steal your soul. I mean, liberate your soul, so that you can ascend into the energy being that you are meant to be under the army of Etbo.
And I would like to offer you guys the real facts about that statement. He sucks them right out of your butthole. I mean, he cuts your head off for no reason, and then down goes the trousers. He has to be physically...
Typical white brotherhood propaganda. Who's
no part of no white
got
brotherhood.
Your best interest in mind? The person that wants you to reach your full potential outside of your physical being, or the guy that wants to keep you anchored to this earth and talking about buttholes? I mean, you guys make the choice. To me, it's pretty clear.
I'd rather talk about buttholes and keep my head, and not have a time lizard, robot, time traveling cyborg suck my very spark of life out of my turd cutter.
No one said anything about buttholes. That is solely...
I know the truth. This is after, we've got an organization too, the Anti-Barn Owl Brigade. We've done our own research.
All right, well,
we know
see,
what's
that's
going
your
on.
problem right there. Barn owls probably will rip your soul out of your butthole because they're evil, uncaring, demonic pricks. But...
Who's controlled by?
It's not like he's got a remote control and he's like, go. No. No.
Oh, yes, he does. They are all implanted with chips and shit. He literally has a remote control. He's got a four-arm little pad. He tells them,
he gives them autonomy, all right? The chip does exist, but it's connected to his own brain. But that's only as a failsafe in case they try to attack him or they do something that he doesn't want them to do. But if he sends them out to attack someone, they can kill them however they want. He doesn't care, so long as the job gets done. You can rip souls out buttholes. That's fine. However, if you're facing evil time traveling Barack Obama himself, he's not going near your butthole. He has no interest in your butthole. He's just trying to help you shed that mortal coil. That's all.
Sure. I have a question for you. So if we confront Obama, evil time traveling Barack Obama, and we just drop trowel and bend over, will he spare cutting off our head?
No, he won't. he has no interest in the butthole.
Just take the soul out. Just get it out. You don't have to kill me. How are you going
to live without a soul?
I'm willing to find out.
Well, you can prostrate yourself in front of evil time traveling Barack Obama and let us know how it works out next week. Kiss the rig, bitch.
Real quick, guys, we want to say thank you to John Roberts for emailing us We always love getting emails from you guys. And he brought up that Lovecraft connection, which was really cool. How hard did you shit your pants when you realized that connection?
Well, I was actually going to talk about it, which is why I said it was like a synchronicity, because I was planning on bringing it up.
That's right.
And then he sent us that, and I was like, oh, shit.
Huh.
Yeah, so good on you for also making the connection. And if you were here, I would give you the best handshake of all time.
A real firm dad handshake.
Think of the best handshake you've ever had. Multiply it by 3,000. That's the handshake that I would give you. And when you pulled your hand away, it would smell like roses, and you'd probably have a package of Smarties in your hand.
Nice.
Yeah. So, I give pretty good handshakes.
Also, we have a friend and listener, Mr. Mike Kuntz, who unfortunately was battling esophageal cancer.
But fortunately,
he beat his ass, and he is cancer-free, and we told him we'd celebrate with him when this day came.
So we figured that we would just throw a fucking party, and you guys can hang out. We've got some weird German DJ, and there's rumors that some special guests might show up. So why don't you guys hang out, get a beer, maybe find somebody who's got some joints and get in the circle. There's punch over in the corner, and there's rumors that there might be a pizza guy showing up.
Yeah, most definitely. Take your back medication, relax. Let's all celebrate Mike being cancer-free. Mike, congratulations, brother. We couldn't be more happy for you, man.
All right, guys, go if you're looking for the drinks that's in the back there. So, help yourselves. I'm not a fucking waiter.
Yeah, one more thing too, guys. No Sublime. That's my rule here, and I stand by it. No Sublime. Sorry, 90s kids.
What's wrong with the 90s? I like the 90s.
Nothing. I just have a problem with Sublime.
God damn it, I just stepped in fucking gum. Who spit their gum on the floor? Which one of you fuckers spit gum on our floor? So help me God when I find out which one of you motherfuckers did it.
Hey, dude, you have any more of that gum?
has anyone seen Barry? Barry Sotero? Anyone? Has he shown up yet?
Yeah, he was invited. He's supposed to have some good stuff.
He said he was bringing some brownies.
Back pills or something like that.
Maybe, I don't know.
Holy shit, Mike. Look at you go. I didn't know you could dance like that. Holy cow. Oh my God. I think Mike's drunk, guys.
No, I just got electrocuted, that's all. Guys, stay away from that cord over there. We're getting the technicians to work on it, but I just got zapped and I don't want anyone else to die almost. Hey, Bigfoot showed up.
Bigfoot. Shirtless, I see. I like it.
Look at those nips.
Everybody knows about your forest dwellings, but we know that the real jewel of your existence are those perky nips. Good to see you, buddy.
Where's the pizza? Did anyone see the pizza guy?
Holy shit, look at this. It's a bunch of empty. The pizza came and left. Thanks, guys. Really. We weren't hungry
guys
at
are
all.
Fucking monsters. Throw this party, eat all the pizza. You know what? Whatever, it's a party. I'll just order more pizza.
Yeah, there we go. We're celebrating. I don't have a problem with pineapple on my pizza, and I think people who do are just conforming to things that are on the internet.
Well, I've got a massive problem with pineapple on my pizza, and if there's any pineapple on this pizza, I'll be very cross.
Oh, I brought my own.
What a weird thing to bring to a party.
Am I being loud?
What?
Dude, I love this song. You're going to love this song.
I doubt it. You know what? I really love this song.
I told you.
Oh, this is that? No, I fucking hate this song. Can someone put on some Sublime?
No
Does anyone
Sublime.
have any Sublime?
What the fuck? Do you guys hear that? Yes, that's Sublime. Someone turn that off. No.
No, you can turn the Sublime back and crank it way up. And if we could get a special dedication to Mateo, that'd be... No? You know, this German DJ that you heard is a real fucking dick.
I think he's on lots of back pills. What they call them, those kids.
Are you fucking kidding? Who keeps spitting their goddamn fucking gum on the floor? This is the second time. And if I'm stepping in it twice now, that means other people are stepping in it too. You're gonna track the gum all over the place. Where's Barry? God damn it, Barry.
One more piece of gum. That was 19 pieces, guys. Beat that, losers.
Guys, how many fingers do you think we can fit in there? Guys? Why, where are you going?
19 pieces of gum worth, I'll tell you that.
19 pieces of gum? What are you talking about?
I don't chew gum.
That's a weird statement to make.
I know I gotta go. Yeah, I have this website on the side, and if you go there, you pay a couple bucks. I make some pretty cool videos with some fish.
Mateo fucked a shark. Guys, did you know that Mateo fucked a shark? He's a shark fucker.
Not even one shark, a bunch of sharks. I fuck a new shark every week, and I put it on Twitch, and I get donations for touching the shark's privates.
All 2 of them. Become a patron of MateoFuckSharks.com. I'll have you know, for all of you guys that are still partying with us, that are patrons, half of that money goes to catching new sharks for Mateo to fuck. So, you know, if you could increase donations, he can fuck bigger sharks.
Yeah, all the new stuff with SeaWorld makes it hard, man. I don't like...
I'm sure it does make it hard, Mateo. I'm sure it does. Badum. should there be a llama here? Is who does this llama belong to? Did anyone bring a llama?
Hey guys, is my llama here yet? What do you see what Mike's gonna do with this llama? He doesn't know it yet, but he's doing something to this llama.
If nobody claims this llama, I'm gonna sacrifice it to evil time traveling Barack Obama. Anyone who's got a problem better step in and stop me. Anyone?
Oh my god, it's like spray paint.